All right, it's recording.
Oh, it's recording.
Okay.
Yeah, something happened there.
Yeah. Well, hey, this is Two Beards in a Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah, since we're recording now.
I'm John Swano.
I'm Dave Tenney. We've already done this episode partially.
Partially, yeah. We're trying some new technology, so bear with us.
John, you want to give us an introduction?
Yeah, so we're looking in Titus chapter 1, and on the last episode, which we recorded a long time ago.
Yes.
But we're catching up here, and we were talking about elders for a little bit. About the qualifications of elders and speaking of them needing to be blameless and so on. And then it goes on from there, and we're picking up at verse 10 in Titus chapter 1. And we're talking about the reason why there needs to be elders, really.
Right.
And so, Dave, you want to read that again?
I'm going to read through the end of the chapter. He says, after he's talked about how an elder ought to be, he says, "For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision, whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole households, teaching things which they ought not for the sake of dishonest gain. One of them, a prophet of their own, said, 'Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons.' This testimony is true. Therefore, rebuke them sharply, that they may be sound in the faith, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men who turn from truth. To the pure, all things are pure, and to those who are defiled and unbelieving is pure. Nothing is pure. But even their mind and conscience are defiled. They profess to know God, but in good works they deny him, being abominable, disobedient, and disqualified for every good work." Abominable. That's a tough word to say.
It is. And it's a lot of those words are not something that you want to have said about yourself.
No.
And as we're going back, talking about appointing elders in every city, back in verse 5, this is definitely what Paul is putting forth to the churches, and this seems to be, as I mentioned before, the reasoning for that, because there are insubordinate idle talkers, those people whose mouths must be stopped, and there has to be some sort of oversight in the local churches.
And we mentioned Cretans in there. We're going to come back to that, but just to remind ourselves that Titus is in Crete. That's where he's at. Right, so when you hear these things, he's talking about the people that are there among them. So he starts off in verse 10. He says, "For there are many insubordinate, both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision." So what's that talking about?
He's talking about Jews that are still hanging on to the old ways, perhaps Judaizing teachers that are trying to bring some of the old law with them into the church of the New Testament, into Christ's church.
And certainly, like if we've paid any attention to our Bible, we know that the problem with Jews holding on to the old law is over and over and over. In fact, like the first 11 chapters of Romans, which we've already studied, that's all it's about. All of these problems, and it's a theme that we just hear multiple times.
And when you think about it, people, I know I am, I'm a creature of habit. You get into a set routine, your bedtimes and times that you get up and things that you do every day. I mean, coffee is at the beginning of my day, and it's just kind of the habit.
And at the end of yours, too.
Well, maybe. I got iced tea tonight.
Yes, yeah.
But anyways, you kind of cut some slack, at least sometimes we point the finger at the Jews and we're like, well, how could they be that way? How could they do those things? But you stop and think, we have the every bit as much ability to do those things if we're not careful.
Yeah.
Because we don't like change. And think about what accepting Christ meant to these people.
Yeah.
It meant changing their job, perhaps, their whole life, the way that they live their life every day.
And it's interesting that Paul talked about, he told Timothy to appoint elders. And obviously there's some problems here that need dealt with. And this kind of illustrates what not all of it, but here's a thing that elders are a work that they're supposed to do. And you could speak directly to this because you are an elder.
Sure.
Right? So I'm just doing it by...
I haven't had to stop too many mouths or things like
good.
that.
That's good.
But yes, that's what we're to do, is to oversee the flock and make sure that things are being taught properly.
Yep. Verse 11 says, so he says, especially those of the circumcision whose mouths must be stopped, who subvert whole households, teaching things which they ought not for the sake of dishonest gain. What do you think was going on there, John? Dishonest gain? That sounds like they were paying somebody.
Asking people to pay for their sins.
Maybe.
It kind of reminds me of things we've seen in other religious groups where perhaps that sort of thing was going on, but also maybe people dealing dishonestly in business.
Yeah, I think about today. There are some religious groups. They'll teach that tithing is still binding, and then they'll pass out at the beginning of the year a pledge card.
Yeah.
Oh, you're gonna give this much this year, and I wonder, where do they get the authority to come up with something like that?
Yeah. We were my wife and I were once a part of a religious group that did that.
Yeah.
They didn't really hold to the tithing. They kind of they understood that tithing was no longer a thing, but they took it upon themselves, and they had an eldership, albeit not really allowed by Christ. It was not.
It wasn't a scriptural.
It wasn't a scriptural eldership, but they would pass out these pledge cards every year, and they would actually keep track of how much you gave. They would hand you a statement that says, this is at the end of the year, this is how much you gave this year. And they did that under the guise of, this is for tax purposes. This is just to help you. But, and there was never any, you have to give so much, but there was sort of an old fashioned guilt trip.
Oh yeah.
Going on there.
Like it.
So
I bet.
But that's not the way that, we don't read anything about that in the scriptures.
Right. And he says they subverted whole households. Subverted sounds like they're causing them to change directions.
Yeah.
So these people are they've got some financial funny things going on, and there's some busybodies there that are trying to turn people away from what they ought to be doing.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Let's move on. Verse 12, it says, one of them, a prophet of their own. Who's the there? I would say...
We're speaking about these Jews.
Yeah, the Jews. Yeah. One of them, a prophet of their own, said, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and gluttons. People from Ohio are fat and lazy and stupid. Well, two of those are right.
Right.
That's the kind of thing. It's interesting. You hear something like that, and it's like you even hear that today. Somebody picks out a group, could be based on what color their skin is, or where they live,
right,
or what language they speak. It doesn't matter. They pick out a group, and they just generalize the whole group.
Right.
And is that what's wrong with that?
Well, I mean, 90% of the time it's wrong. It's you're just picking on one specific thing that you've seen maybe amongst one person, but it really causes division. That's the real problem. It causes people to be adversaries, yes. And we're supposed to be. Again, this is all speaking of within the confines of the church, really, and the church is not supposed to be at each other's throats and calling each other's names. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Not even on Facebook.
Right. Verse
13. This testimony is true. What? Now this almost might sound funny.
If you read that the wrong way, yeah.
Right. Paul says, Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, lazy gluttons. This testimony is true. Now you can take that totally out of its context. And
If we were a certain 3-letter news organization,
Yes.
we might do that.
yes, absolutely. Right? So what is Paul saying that's true?
No, he's saying the things that he says are true.
Yeah.
That these things are going on, not that their statement is true.
Right, absolutely. He says, therefore, well, what's that for?
You got to figure that out.
What's the
Why is it
therefore
there?
there? Therefore, rebuke them sharply that they may be sound in the faith. That sounds like some discipline going on there.
Yeah, and a sharp rebuke, again, is not comfortable.
For neither party.
Right. If you've ever had to, I said this, I think, in the last episode or one of the near recent episodes, that when we're talking about this job of an elder, it reminds me often of being a parent.
Yeah.
And this is one of those things where when you have to discipline your children, it's not, at least it shouldn't be, something that you look forward to.
No.
It's always something that is not fun, but it's necessary. And sometimes you need to be sharp about it.
Yeah.
To get, I mean, from speaking for myself, I have needed people to rattle my cage a little bit throughout my life to get me to listen and to understand. Okay,
Yeah.
this is the direction that you need to
Right.
go.
I know there's been a few times with my son, who's 17, where I've had to speak to him as a man,
Right,
which is a different attitude than I would normally have.
right,
Right, but sometimes somebody needs to hear something that maybe not as nice to hear, but you need to hear this,
right.
and that's pretty a normal thing for dads to have to do, right?
It should be.
Yeah, it should be.
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of kids out there that need that.
Oh, they need it.
Yeah.
Even good kids need it once in a while.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so he says that they're going to be sound in faith. He says, not giving heed to Jewish fables and commandments of men who turn from the truth. What do you think he meant by Jewish fable?
Well, it would seem to me, and feel free to correct me or push me in the right direction here, but it would seem to me that throughout the time of the Jews, even looking back to, I'm going to try to make a connection, but even looking back to their time in the wilderness, they were always looking for something to hold on to.
Yeah.
And so perhaps they had in time made some addendums to the things that were written and added some things to the law. As we look today, there are those that still profess Judaism are no different than any other religious group insofar as they often have their the things that were put in there by men in their doctrine, or whatever. And we have to be careful of that in the church as well, because we have those men that have gone before us, or maybe are still living, that are just good orators.
Yeah.
And sometimes people follow them, and maybe this is what we're talking about here.
I think another thing we could consider is it could be that statement where he said Cretans are always liars, evil beasts, and gluttons. Maybe maybe that's something he was referring to. But it's interesting because those are people that made it. The congregation was made up, at least partially, of Cretans. And it's pretty tough when you're saying those kind of things about the people that are in your flock.
Yeah, and what is the purpose of a fable? Why would we tell fables to children?
I can't. It's usually to teach some a lesson, a fable, right?
Yeah, and so that would line up.
Like the hare and the tortoise.
Yeah,
That would be a fable.
yeah. So maybe those that are speaking these things and calling those from Crete, evil beasts and lazy gluttons, maybe they're in their own mind they're trying to give some kind of warning.
Yeah.
Because of their own disjointed, maladjusted way of thinking.
hard to say because it doesn't tell us exactly what that is.
Right.
But those are, I think, two decent guesses.
Yeah.
Right. That's another case of something that actually doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's interesting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is not a situation of law.
No.
This is just we're trying to get context.
Yeah. Absolutely. He says, to the pure, all things are pure. And to those who are defiled and unbelieving, nothing is pure. But even their mind and conscience are defiled. Mm-hmm. Okay, so who are the pure?
The faithful.
I would say, yep. And then he says to the unbelieving, well, they would not be faithful. Mm-hmm. Right? So they would say nothing is pure. And then he says, even their conscience and mind are defiled. And one thing about our conscience, what's that formed by?
By your knowledge,
Yeah,
and your experiences, your actions.
Yeah, what you've been taught.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brings to mind, back in the Garden of Eden, before sin entered the picture, Adam and Eve were pure.
Yes.
And whatever they did was pure. There was no sin because they didn't have the knowledge of good and evil. But then once that came into play, then their thoughts started to go more selfish, in a more selfish way, and away from what the Lord wanted. In the beginning there was just that one rule: don't take of this fruit.
Yeah.
And now we have a few more rules.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, if we have our minds focused on godly things and we're walking in that direction, then we're going to be pure.
Yeah.
But if we're self-seeking, then it's going to be a situation of impurity.
Yeah, absolutely. Verse 16. So he says, they profess to know God. He's talking about the they is the unbelieving. So they profess to know God, but in works they deny him, being, there's that word, abominable, disobedient, and disqualified for every good work. So I think he's talking back here, whoever these Jews are that are teaching things that they ought not, and they are involved in dishonest gain, and they're saying these fables and different things. Mm-hmm. They also profess that they know God,
right?
But it says in works they deny him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what kind of works is he talking about? What's he talking by that?
Well, for one thing, if we're talking about people that are trying to hang on to traditions of the Jews that are no longer required, then we're talking about the rituals and the ceremonial washings and the things that were once commanded by the Lord.
That's one of those things is like you'll see that term throughout the New Testament, works, and there are different kinds of works. And when you see it, just try to ferret out what it's actually talking. What does that mean when he says works? Because sometimes, it's a work of faith, and sometimes it's a work of merit.
Yeah, the scriptures say you shall know them by their fruit.
Or sometimes it's a work of the old law.
Yeah.
Right? There's different kinds of works.
And today, for to bring it forward to how can we use this information, we can know if we come across a religious group or someone is trying to teach us something religious, we can know whether or not that is of God.
Yeah.
By looking into the scriptures and finding out if indeed that is something that the Lord has asked for.
The way I understand this verse, he says that they profess to know God, but in works they deny him. The way I understand it is that they even though they say they believe God, what they're doing is not showing that. They're doing the opposite of that. I guess that's the way I understand that. So.
Yeah. They're you can see it when people profess Christ. They use the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
Yet then they're out there swindling.
Yeah.
They're looking for the next buck, or they're looking for what can help their individual plight. I can't remember the phrase. It'll come to me eventually. But my father-in-law has a hat that he found somewhere that says, "I love Jesus." Here it is. "I love Jesus, the Word, not the word Jesus." And that's really. That's kind of profound when you stop and pick that apart. That a lot of people scream the name Jesus from the housetops, but they don't love the word.
Right, and I think that goes back to there are lots of discussions in the Bible about faith, but true faith has to have obedience with it. But that doesn't mean that there isn't people don't claim to have a faith that doesn't have an obedience. It's just of no use.
Right.
Are there people that have faith in God but then don't do the things that He says? There are. I think there's a lot of people. A lot of people believe in God.
I'd say in that case, it's a shallow or misguided faith. Because faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So if you really have a faith in the Lord, then your actions are going to be shaped by the word.
I think of when James in James chapter 2, where it says, he says, "You say you believe, but even the demons believe and shudder."
Yeah.
Even the demons have faith, and they know that Jesus is real. A lot of people do.
Right.
But the difference is they're not obedient.
Right.
Right. So that faith was worthless.
Right.
Well, these Jews here, that was their problem. They were saying they had faith, but it wasn't producing the actions of obedience.
And there's a inextricable connection between belief and faith, but they're not exactly the same.
Yeah.
It's definitely it's certainly the first step.
Yeah.
To believe.
Yeah.
To study the scriptures, to believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of the living God. That's step number one.
But then you have to have obedience.
Right.
You have to have we don't just have faith, we have to have an obedient faith, and that's
right.
the difference.
Yep.
I think. Chapter 2, John.
All right. Starting at verse 1 and
let's see here. Oh man. Well, go ahead. We got about
10 verses.
What do we got? About 8 minutes. I can't see. Yeah,
22.
about 7, 8 minutes. Let's see if we can get through verse 10.
All right. Very good. So Titus chapter 2 says, "But as for you, speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine, that the older men may be sober, reverent, temperate, sound in faith, in love and patience. The older women likewise, that they be reverent in behavior, not slanderers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they admonish the young women to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God may not be blasphemed. Likewise exhort the young men to be sober-minded in all things, showing yourself to be a pattern of good works, and doctrine, showing integrity, reverence, incorruptibility, sound speech that cannot be condemned, that one who is an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say of you. Exhort bondservants to be obedient to their own masters, to be well-pleasing in all things, not answering back, not pilfering, but showing all good fidelity, that they may adorn the doctrine of God, our Savior, in all things."
All right, so now Paul's talking about some of the individuals, the individual groups that are members of this congregation here in Crete, and he kind of singles each of them out, and he tells them how they ought to behave. So he says, "But as for you," right now, I think he's probably talking to the elders. You elders, probably. He could be talking to Titus, but it doesn't say. It's not. He says, "But as you speak the things which are proper for sound doctrine," right? So maybe it could be either or. I could go along with either or, the elders or Titus.
Yeah, both.
Right? So what's how the old fellers got to be? They got to be sober, reverent. So what's sober mean?
I have a little note in here. It says temperate.
Temperate.
Yeah, to be even keel, even minded, not
I disagree with that, John.
and not to
Be a,
you don't want to be one of those people that everything is a joke.
yeah.
Either. So there's a temperate, sober way of handling yourself.
Yeah. And also, serious. I think that's,
Yeah.
I think that's a good way of looking at it. He says reverent. Is it be having respect for God? Temperate. What's that mean? They're at the right temperature?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's
Again,
that?
it's just even keel, not flying off the handle.
Yeah.
And also, having some seriousness.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the next one?
Sound in faith.
All right. So
Yeah.
that would be just having having works to an obedient faith.
Kind of connects back to what we were talking about in the last section there.
Yeah.
That we have that soundness to the way that we conduct ourselves. I guess looking for another word.
Yeah.
Not supposed to use the same word in a definition, but
we're supposed to be that way in
Right.
in our faith and in our love and in our patience. So now the older women, right?
right.
So a lot of the same things, but here they're not told to be sober. They're told to be not given to much wine. Some of these ladies, I don't know.
Yeah, and so that word sober up above, the older men being sober, it really speaks to, I think, seriousness.
Yeah.
We use the word sober today in regards to drunkenness or alcohol, but I'm not so sure that's the same connotation.
Yeah, I don't think it is.
But not given to much wine, and I think the key word there is given.
Right.
Because if you're given to it, it's got control over you.
Yeah, you got a problem.
You're addicted.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there may be and you have to also realize that the word wine, as we see it here in the scriptures, as it is translated, sometimes it loses, and we'd have to look at exactly which word this is that they've translated. But nonetheless, without all of that, getting into those weeds, you realize that the teaching here is that the older women stay away from things that are going to be
A snare to them.
going to be a snare or cause them to stumble.
Absolutely. I like the one where he says not slanderers, right? They don't falsely, I think the King James uses false accusers.
Yeah.
Right? So that's something.
Kind of runs akin to, gossiping, running around,
Yeah.
busybody, kind of.
Yeah. I always think it's interesting how I think men in general are more susceptible to certain sins and women are more susceptible to other sins. And that would be one that I think women many times are more susceptible to.
Right.
So, now here's what they should do. They should admonish the young men and women. So they're supposed to teach these young girls to do what? To love their husbands, right? To love their children, to be discreet. What does that mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I can explain it by painting a picture. If you look at a social, quote unquote, social club or a place that young women and men would go to entertain themselves on the weekend in present the there's no discretion going on there.
Yes.
There's no thinking about your actions.
Right.
It's the things that happen when you allow the strong drink to take over.
Oh, yeah. Yep, absolutely. He says to be chaste. So what do you think that means?
Pure.
Pure, yeah. Homemakers, good, obedient to their own husbands. Can I say that loud for joy? No. That the word of God might not be blasphemed. So if you're a lady and you're listening to this and and you're wanting some advice on how to be pleasing to God, there we go. Right. Now we aren't going to leave the fellas out because the fellas have some of the same kinds of commands.
I think of at one of the assemblies that my family has been a member of in the past. I remember there was an older lady that her and her husband have since moved to Florida, but this older lady took it upon herself to have the young ladies over to her house probably about every month, and they would have talks about these very things. They would have, she was doing everything she could to bring the young ladies of in the faith, up in the scriptures. They would have a Bible study and talk about how to be a good wife, a good mother.
Yeah.
What the Lord is looking for, in those roles. And boy, do we need a lot of that.
We do.
In the world in general.
Yeah. We need godly women as much as we need godly men.
Yeah.
He says, likewise, exhort the young men to be sober-minded in all things, showing yourself to be a pattern of good works and doctrine, showing integrity, reverence, incorruptibility, sound speech that cannot be condemned. That one who is an opponent may be ashamed, having nothing evil to say of you.
Yeah. You can think of, perhaps on a less, this is speaking, very spiritually, of people that are supposed to have a spiritual mind. But even in the world, maybe even in a political realm, if you have somebody who just doesn't go down the same dirty paths that everybody else does, when someone tries to throw mud at them, it doesn't stick.
Right.
And people can say things, but before long they end up looking like the fool. And that's what this is talking about. If we, as Christians, as Christian men, if we don't allow ourselves to go down these sticky paths that could cause, where we can run into some snares, then people might say bad things about us, but it's not going to stick.
Yeah. And when that happened, that has happened to me in the last year. And, when somebody may make some false accusations against you, you can hold your head high because you know you didn't do it. Right. And you can stick to your guns because you know you're innocent.
Right.
And you can have a confidence that you could never have if unless you were doing the right thing all the time. So it's this stuff's super important.
Yeah.
And you're not going to be able to support a wife and a family if you're not this kind of guy.
Yeah.
You're never going to raise godly children. You're never going to be a good example to your children if you're not this kind of guy.
Yeah. In fact, you can put on a show for a while.
Yeah.
You might be able to fool some people for a while, but eventually, if you're not living out this way of life, things are going to fall apart.
Yeah. People are going to find you out. Right?
Yeah.
So, got good advice here. He says, exhort bondservants. So these are slaves, right? There was slavery back then. He says to be obedient to their masters, to be well-pleasing in all things, not answering back, not pilfering, right? Stealing stuff, but showing all good fidelity that they may adorn the doctrine of God our Savior in all things. And just the idea is here, same thing is, doesn't matter what group you're in, what age you are, what your situation in life is, you can carry out God's commandments in whatever station that you're in.
Right. You realize, we were talking about this in Medina not too long ago, the idea of bondservants. And, there are those that in their life, for whatever reason, whatever cultural or otherwise, whatever reason it is, they become bound to somebody, maybe, just in a simple way, if we are an employee, we're bound to our boss or the company to do things according to their policies and so on. And so you have that bond between you and them, and that is your lot. God's purpose is to save mankind. He's concerned with spiritual things.
Right.
All of the other things that happen on this earth unfortunately, sometimes they're involved with evil men who do evil things.
Yeah.
And you realize that even if you're in one of those situations that is completely unfair, that you should not be in, but for whatever reason, because of society, you're there, and because of human beings, you're there. As a Christian, you still put forth the right step. You do things as God would want you to do it, as to the Lord.
Yeah.
And everything will be okay, because in eternity, you'll have been pleasing to the Lord. And as James says, this life is but a vapor. And so why spend so much time worrying about this little vapor of time?
Yeah.
When it comes to...
I think it's interesting how there are many times in the Bible where there are stories of righteous people put in jail. Mm-hmm. And the example is, maybe if you're in jail right now, that doesn't mean that you can't do what's right in God's eyes. Right. The situation you're in doesn't matter. You think about the story about Joseph. In his case, he was unjustly put in jail, and he still did what was right in God's eyes. And the situation doesn't matter, I think.
Yeah, and Paul.
Yep. Paul and Silas were in prison.
And even Christ, being taken away and falsely accused. And it wasn't, his concern wasn't for, the fairness of that situation.
Right.
It was for what must be done to save mankind.
Absolutely. All right, John, we better stop.
All right. Well, thanks for joining in. We'll see you next time.